Renee stared at her phone, the screen glowing in the dark corner of her small soul apartment. 3 short lines sat there like tiny knives. "It's over, Renee. I can't do this anymore. Please don't call me." Her hands shook as she read the words again. She tried to laugh, but it came out as a broken sound. After everything, moving across an ocean, saving every dollar for art school, helping him apply for jobs, he ended it with a message. "No goodbye, no reason," she whispered. "Just a text." The walls of the apartment felt too tight. She grabbed her jacket, her wallet, and her phone, then stepped into the chilly night. The city lights spread around her like a map of other people's happiness. She walked without direction, trying not to cry. Seoul had always felt busy, full of motion and noise, but tonight it felt like it was pushing her away. At a street corner, she saw her own face reflected in a shop window. Brown skin glowing faintly under the neon sign, eyes red, lipstick smudged. She looked like someone who had lost the one thing she'd built her life around. Renee's heart thudded painfully. "You're not going to fall apart over him," she muttered. "Not tonight." Still, she turned toward the only place that didn't remind her of him, the art district. Inside one of the galleries, her own paintings hung on the wall, bursts of color and wild landscapes from her home in Ghana. She had dreamed this moment for years, but standing there alone now made it feel meaningless. A group of guests walked by, laughing softly in Korean. One of them said, "Her style is different. So bold." The words should have made her proud, but instead, they only reminded her that Mark wasn't there to hear them. She left the gallery before anyone could talk to her. The rain had started, thin and cold. Neon lights reflected in the puddles as she crossed the street toward the sound of music coming from somewhere deeper in the district. The heavy bass called to her like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. "Maybe one drink," she said quietly. "Just one." The sign above the door glowed violet, the black orchid. Inside, heat and rhythm swallowed her. The music was deep, the crowd pressed close together. She took a seat at the bar and ordered something sweet and strong. The bartender spoke little English, but he smiled kindly as he passed her the glass. "To moving on," she whispered and took a long sip. First it helped. The warmth of the drink made the world blur at the edges, and for a moment she felt invisible, free of everything that had hurt her. But when the next song started, a soft R&B rhythm that Mark used to play while he painted, tears filled her eyes again. She wiped them away quickly. "You don't get to make me cry anymore," she told the memory of him. A tall woman with silver hair danced near her and smiled. "Come on, dance with us," she shouted over the music. Renee hesitated, then smiled back. "Why not?" The crowd swallowed her again. She moved with the rhythm, closing her eyes. The lights flashed blue, pink, gold. The floor shook beneath her feet. For the first time in months, she let herself breathe. She didn't notice the man on the balcony watching her, the one who owned the club. Rian June leaned against the glass railing of the VIP section, a half-finished drink beside him. Below, the dance floor moved like one living thing, shadows, colors, and noise. His world was made of control and calculation, but tonight something disrupted it. A woman in a red jacket stood out from the crowd. Not because of the color of her skin, though it glowed under the lights like warm bronze against a sea of pale faces, but because of the way she moved. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She looked like someone dancing away pain. "Boss," said Choi, his second-in-command, stepping up beside him. "The Red Dragon Group wants to meet tomorrow. Should I set it?" "Later," Rian said without looking away from the floor. "Who is she?" Choi followed his gaze. "Don't know. Foreigner. Probably a tourist." Rian's brow furrowed. "Get someone to make sure she leaves safely." Choi raised an eyebrow. "You care since when?" Rian ignored him. He told himself he didn't care. He just didn't want trouble in his club. But when he turned back a minute later, the woman was gone from the dance floor. "Find her," he said quietly. Down below, Renee had slipped away from the crowd. The air inside the club had grown too thick, too hot. She made her way down a narrow hallway toward the restroom, steadying herself against the wall. The drinks had gone to her head faster than expected. Her vision blurred for a moment, then cleared again. She pushed the door open, took a few deep breaths, and stared at her reflection in the mirror. "You're fine," she told herself. "You just need water." But as she left the restroom, she bumped into two men standing by the corridor. They smiled too widely, their eyes too sharp. "You alone?" one of them asked in accented English. "Yes, but I'm leaving now," Renee said quickly. "Let us help you," the other said, reaching for her arm. She pulled back. "No, thank you." Her voice wavered. One of them laughed. "Just being friendly." She tried to step past, but her legs felt strangely weak. The hallway spun slightly. Her heartbeat raced in her ears. "Something's wrong," she thought. "Maybe someone put something in my drink." She opened her mouth to shout, but before she could, a new voice cut through the noise. Calm, deep, dangerous. "Let her go." The men froze. A tall figure stood at the end of the corridor. Black suit, dark eyes, expression unreadable. "Rian June." "Who are you?" one of the men snapped. Rian didn't answer. He stepped closer, his gaze steady. The men shifted uneasily. Even without words, his presence was enough to make the air heavy. The first man let go of Renee's arm. "We didn't mean." Rian's hand shot forward, grabbing the man by the collar. "You don't touch my guests," he said quietly in Korean. Even without understanding the language, Renee could hear the threat inside his voice. He shoved the man backward, and both of them stumbled away down the hall, muttering apologies. The sound of their footsteps faded into the bass of the music. Renee leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "Thank you," she managed to say. "I think someone put something in my drink." Her knees buckled. Before she could fall, strong arms caught her. "Easy," Rian said, his voice softer now. "You're safe." Everything blurred again. She felt herself being lifted. The scent of his cologne, clean, faintly smoky, was the last thing she remembered before darkness. When Renee woke, the world was quieter. She was lying on a long leather couch in a room that glowed with dim golden light. The club's noise was far away now. Her head pounded. She sat up slowly. Across the room, the man from before, Rian June, was talking quietly to someone in Korean. When he noticed her moving, he ended the call. "Feeling better?" he asked. "I think so." Her voice was hoarse. "Where am I?" "In my office." "You were drugged," he said simply. "I called a doctor, but he's on his way." Renee rubbed her temples. "Drugged? How? Why?" She stopped, realizing the answer didn't matter right now. "Thank you for helping me." Rian nodded once. "It's fine." He poured a glass of water and handed it to her. She hesitated, then took it. His eyes stayed on her. Not unkind, but unreadable. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said. "This place isn't safe for people who don't know its rules." "I didn't know that," she said. "I just wanted to forget for a while." He tilted his head slightly. "Forget what?" She gave a small, tired laugh. "Everything. Man. A mistake." For a brief moment, something like understanding flickered across his face. "Men," he said quietly, almost to himself. "They cause more trouble than war sometimes." Despite herself, she smiled faintly. "You sound like you've seen both." "I have," he said, and his tone told her it wasn't a joke. Silence stretched between them for a moment. Then the door opened, and a middle-aged man carrying a small case entered. He spoke to Rian in rapid Korean, and then turned to Renee with a polite bow. "Doctor," Rian explained. "He'll make sure you're all right." The doctor checked her pulse, her pupils, asked her a few simple questions in slow English. "You need rest," he said finally. "Drink water. No alcohol tonight." When he left, Rian turned back to her. "Do you have someone I can call?" "A friend." Renee shook her head. "No one. I just moved here." He studied her for a moment. "Then I'll have my driver take you home." You've already done enough, she said quickly. I don't want to cause trouble. You didn't, he replied. They did. He picked up his phone, murmured something to whoever was on the other end, and then stood. Come. Renee followed him through a back hallway away from the crowd. The air outside hit her like a cold wave. A black car waited at the curb. Rian opened the door for her. You should stay away from clubs like this, he said quietly. She looked up at him, trying to read his expression. Are you always this serious? Only when it matters. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Hers still cloudy with confusion, his sharp and watchful. Then she stepped into the car. Thank you, Mr. Rian June, he said. I'm Renee. I know, he answered, closing the door. The driver started the engine. Through the window, she saw him standing there under the streetlight, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. As the car pulled away, Renee leaned back against the seat. Her heart was still racing. She didn't know why she felt both safe and uneasy at the same time. Outside, the neon lights of Seoul slid past like falling stars. That night, Rian stayed in his office long after the club emptied. Choi knocked on the door. Boss, the Red Dragon meeting. Tomorrow, Rian said, still staring at the street where the car had disappeared. I have something else to think about tonight. He didn't add what that something was. A stranger's frightened eyes that had somehow unsettled a man who feared nothing. And somewhere across the city, Renee sat by her window, the memory of his calm voice replaying in her head. She didn't know his world or his name's weight in the underworld of Seoul, but deep down she sensed one thing clearly. Her life had just changed course, and she didn't yet understand how far that single night would reach. Renee's dreams that night were a blur of light and motion, flashing neon, heavy bass, the sharp smell of smoke and rain. When she woke the next morning, sunlight cut across her apartment floor, soft and ordinary, as if nothing strange had happened. She sat up slowly, her head still heavy. For a few moments, she wondered if she had imagined everything. The men, the drug, the man who'd saved her. But then she saw it. A folded piece of paper on her nightstand. She frowned and reached for it. The handwriting was elegant and precise. Drink water. Rest. Do not go out alone for a few days. B&J. Renee stared at it. How had he even gotten into her apartment? She checked her phone, nothing. No messages, no missed calls. Her stomach twisted between unease and something else she didn't want to name. She got up and walked to the window. Outside, Seoul moved like always. People rushing, horns blaring, lives continuing. She had come here to start fresh, not to become part of someone else's strange story. I'm not getting pulled into this, she said aloud. Still that night she dreamed of him again, standing above the dance floor, eyes like shadows, watching her as if he could see straight through her. Across the city, inside a penthouse high above the Han River, Rian June sat in silence. The room was all glass and steel, the skyline stretching endlessly before him. Choi stood nearby, arms crossed. You've been quiet since last night, he said. Who was she, really? A random girl. Rian didn't answer immediately. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the city lights. There's something about her, he said finally. Choi raised an eyebrow. Something dangerous. Not to me, Rian said softly. But maybe to herself. He reached for a file on his desk. Inside was a single photograph. A surveillance capture from the club's camera. Renee, mid-step, laughing faintly, her curls catching the light. Choi sighed. Boss, we have bigger problems. The Red Dragon Syndicate is moving into our district again. You can't get distracted. Rian closed the folder. I'm not distracted, he said, though his tone lacked conviction. I just don't like loose ends. The next few days passed slowly for Renee. She returned to her gallery, determined to pretend everything was normal. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Sometimes when she walked home, she heard footsteps behind her. Steady, slow, disappearing when she turned around. Her friends back home texted asking how Seoul was. She typed replies, "It's beautiful. Busy." I'm fine. And deleted each one before sending. One afternoon while she was cleaning brushes, a man walked into her gallery. Tall, Korean, dressed simply but neatly. He looked around at her paintings before speaking. "You're the artist?" he asked. "Yes." Renee smiled politely. "Can I help you?" "I was sent by Mr. Rian June," the man said. "He wanted me to deliver this." He handed her a small black envelope and bowed slightly before leaving. Her heart jumped. She tore it open. Inside was a note written in the same neat handwriting. "You left your bracelet in the car that night. Safe with me. Come by if you want it back. Rian J." She looked down at her wrist. The silver bracelet her mother had given her was missing. How could she have been so careless? Renee hesitated for a long time. She told herself she didn't need it, that going to see him was a bad idea. But by evening, she was already in a taxi heading to the address on the envelope. The building was sleek and modern, standing over the city like a quiet sentinel. The lobby was so polished she could see her reflection on the floor. The elevator opened onto the top floor. As soon as she stepped out, she saw him. Rian stood by a wall of windows, his back to her, looking over the city. "Miss Renee," he said without turning. "You came." She crossed her arms. "You had something of mine." He turned then. The late sun cut across his face, outlining the sharp lines of his jaw. He looked calm, controlled, yet there was something tired behind his eyes. "Yes," he said. "I kept it safe." He walked to a table and handed her the bracelet. She took it quickly. "Thank you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Now, if that's all." "You don't seem afraid," he said suddenly. She blinked. "Should I be?" "Most people are," he said simply, "when they find out who I am." "I don't even know who you are," she replied. "And I don't want to." Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "You're honest. I like that." Renee sighed. "Look, I appreciate what you did for me. You didn't have to help. But I can take care of myself." "Can you?" he asked quietly. The question irritated her. "Yes. I've been doing it my whole life." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then be careful where you dance next time." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Your paintings," he said. "The ones in the gallery, you use a lot of red and gold. Fire colors." "Why?" She hesitated. "Because fire destroys, but it also creates. It makes room for new things to grow." He smiled faintly. "Interesting. Most people only see the destruction." Renee didn't answer. She stepped into the elevator, pressing the button with more force than necessary. As the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of him standing there, unreadable. She told herself that was the last time she'd see him. But part of her knew it wasn't true. That night, Rian stood again by the window, watching the city burn in 1,000 lights. Choi entered without knocking. She came, Rian said. And Rian's eyes stayed on the skyline. "She's nothing like Hannah." Choi froze. "You shouldn't compare them." "I'm not," Rian said softly. "But she makes me remember." The next day, Seoul woke to rain. It fell in silver sheets, washing over rooftops and sidewalks. Renee stood by her window, watching it trace long lines down the glass. She tried to paint, but the colors wouldn't come together. Every stroke felt wrong. Her mind kept drifting back to the penthouse, to his calm voice, to the strange quiet of that place. "Stop thinking about him," she said to herself. "He's trouble." Still, by evening, she found herself scrolling through her phone, searching his name. There were almost no results, just whispers on forums and scattered business articles. A real estate magnate, club owner, a man whose money came from nowhere anyone could trace. The silence around him was louder than any rumor. She was still staring at the screen when her phone buzzed. A new message. "You shouldn't walk home alone at night. RJ." Her breath caught. She turned toward her window. Across the street, parked under the shadow of a streetlight, a black car idled. The windows were tinted, but she knew who it was. She should have been angry, maybe afraid, but instead she felt a strange calm. She typed back, "Stop following me." No reply came. After a moment, the car pulled away into the rain. Hours later, she was asleep when a loud crash jolted her awake. Glass shattered. Her heart jumped. Someone was in her apartment. She grabbed her phone and whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Just footsteps. Then a hand grabbed her arm, rough and fast. She screamed. A second later, the intruder hit the floor with a thud. The lights came on. Rian stood in her doorway, breathing hard, rain dripping from his hair. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. Renee blinked in shock. What are you doing here?" "I followed you," he said simply. "You were right. Someone else did too." He pointed to the man now groaning on the floor, one of the faces she vaguely remembered from the club hallway. "I told you that place wasn't safe," Rian said. "They thought you were alone." Renee backed away, shaking. "You can't just break into people's homes." "I didn't break in," he said calmly. "I kicked the door open." "That's not better," she snapped. For a moment, silence filled the small room, broken only by the sound of rain and the unconscious man's faint breathing. Finally Rian sighed. "Pack a bag." "What?" "It's not safe here anymore. You're coming with me." "No," she said firmly. "You can't tell me what to do." He looked at her for a long moment. "If you stay, they'll come back. If you come, I can keep you alive. Decide." The weight of his words hung heavy between them. Renee glanced at the shattered window, the dark rain outside, then at the man lying on her floor. Her pulse raced. "Fine," she said quietly. "But only until I find somewhere else." "Of course," he said, though there was a hint of something in his tone, something that said he didn't plan to let her go so easily. They drove through the city in silence. The rain streaked across the windshield, catching the light of every passing sign. Renee sat with her arms crossed, still shaking. "Who were they?" she asked finally. "Men from a rival group," Rian said. "They were supposed to send me a message. Instead, they found you first. And you just happened to be outside my building." "I told you," he said. "I don't like loose ends." She looked at him. "You mean people?" His jaw tightened. "People are the biggest loose ends." Renee turned back to the window. "You're not making me feel better." He didn't answer. When the car finally stopped, she expected another sleek building or a hidden club. Instead, it was a tall, quiet tower overlooking the river. His penthouse again. The elevator doors opened to a vast living room filled with dim light and the soft hum of rain against glass. "You can stay here for tonight," he said. "The guest room is down the hall." "I'm not staying here forever," she said. "Of course not," he said again, that same unreadable tone. Renee followed him, too tired to argue more. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment. White sheets, dark wood, and a view of the glowing city below. "Get some sleep," he said quietly from the doorway. "You'll need it." Before she could reply, he closed the door. For a long time, Renee sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the skyline. The night outside was endless, the rain a curtain of silver. Somewhere in the next room, she could hear him moving. Slow, deliberate steps, the clink of glass, the low murmur of a phone call in Korean. She should have been afraid. She should have called the police. Instead, she felt a strange sense of safety, a fragile calm she didn't understand. When she finally lay down, her eyes stayed open for a long time. In the darkness, she whispered to herself, "You're just here for one night. One night, then you leave." But deep inside, she knew the truth. This wasn't the end of her story with Rian. It was only the beginning. The first thing Renee noticed when she woke was the silence. It wasn't like her small apartment, where she could hear cars, voices, and the hum of the street below. Here everything was still. She sat up slowly. Morning sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long golden lines across the marble floor. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she remembered the broken glass, the man in her apartment, and the stranger who had pulled her out of danger again. Her heart beat faster. She was in his home. Renee swung her legs off the bed and stood. Her bare feet sank into the soft carpet. On the nightstand was a tray. Breakfast, fruit, toast, and a small cup of tea. Someone had thought ahead. She picked up the cup, the warmth calming her shaking hands, when the door opened quietly. Rian June stepped in. He was dressed in a dark suit, the kind that looked effortless but expensive. His hair was still damp from a shower, and he moved with the same calm control he always had. "You slept," he said. "I didn't have much choice," Renee replied. "Your bed could probably put a wild animal to sleep." He almost smiled. That was the idea. She put the cup down. "I'm leaving today." He leaned against the doorframe. "It's not safe yet. They'll come looking again." Renee crossed her arms. "You can't just keep me here." He tilted his head slightly. "You keep saying that. But the truth is, you're safer here than anywhere else." "I don't want safety," she said. "I want freedom." For a moment he didn't respond. His eyes studied her quietly, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. Then he stepped closer. "You think freedom means being alone," he said. "But in my world, being alone gets you killed." "I'm not in your world," Renee said sharply. He nodded once, almost sadly. "Not yet." Before she could reply, someone knocked. Choi entered, his usual frown in place. "Boss, the Red Dragon meeting starts in 30 minutes. Rian's tone shifted back to command. "I'll be ready." Choi glanced at Renee, then back at Rian. "Should I?" "No," Rian said. "She stays." When Choi left, Renee exhaled hard. "You talk about me like I'm furniture." "I talk about you like I'm responsible for you," Rian said calmly. "Until I know they won't come after you again, that's the way it will be." Renee stared at him, anger and confusion battling inside her. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." His eyes darkened. "Because once, I didn't help someone when I should have. I won't make that mistake again." There was something raw in his voice. Grief, regret, something old and heavy. For a brief second, she saw the man behind the control. Then his expression closed again. He turned toward the door. "There are clothes in the closet if you need them. Don't leave the apartment." When he was gone, the silence returned. Renee sank back onto the bed, her head spinning. Who was this man really? A criminal? A savior? Something in between. She walked to the window. The city stretched out far below, alive and glittering. Somewhere out there was her small apartment, her paintings, her old life. But it all felt distant now, like a story she'd read once and forgotten. Behind her, the faintest scent of his cologne lingered in the air, sharp, smoky, and uncomfortably familiar. Renee rubbed her bracelet nervously. "Just one more day," she whispered. "Then I'm gone." But deep down she already doubted that promise. That evening Rian returned. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, his voice rougher than before. Renee was sitting on the couch, a book open in her hands though she hadn't turned a page in an hour. "You're still here," he said. "I said I'd stay one day." He nodded slightly. "Thank you." She frowned. "You don't strike me as someone who says thank you often." "Only when I mean it." He walked to the small bar in the corner and poured a glass of water. "How long have you been in Seoul?" 3 months, she said. "I came here to show my art. And it's been complicated." She gave a small laugh. "I thought heartbreak would be easier in a new city. Turns out pain doesn't need a passport." For a second, Rian's lips curved upward. "That's honest." "I've had enough lies," she said softly. "From people I trusted." He didn't respond, but his gaze softened slightly. Then he handed her the glass. "Drink." She took it and met his eyes. "You always tell people what to do. Only when they don't listen the first time," he said and walked away. Later, when he disappeared into his study, Renee wandered through the penthouse. The rooms were minimalist, almost cold. Dark wood, metal, glass, everything in perfect order. But near one wall, she found something unexpected. A piano. She touched one of the keys lightly. The note echoed through the empty space, low and rich. "You play?" came his voice behind her. He turned, startled. "I used to. When I was a kid." He came closer. "Play something." She shook her head. "It's been years." He didn't insist, but the look he gave her said he wanted to hear it. So she sat down and began to play. The tune was soft and hesitant at first, then steadier. It was a melody her mother used to hum on rainy days, something full of memory and ache. When she finished, the silence felt heavier than before. Rian said quietly, "It's beautiful." Renee looked at him. "Do you play?" "No. I listen." "To what?" He smiled faintly. "To things most people try to forget." For a moment the world outside disappeared. The rain, the danger, even the walls around them. Just two people, both broken in ways neither wanted to admit. The next morning, Renee woke to find the city shrouded in fog. She stretched, yawned, and decided she needed air. The door wasn't locked anymore. That felt like a small victory. She found Rian in the kitchen, pouring coffee. He glanced up. "You're awake early." "I couldn't sleep," she said. He nodded toward the cup. "You want some?" She hesitated, then accepted. "You really do everything yourself, don't you?" He raised an eyebrow. "Does that surprise you?" "A little. I thought mafia bosses had people for that." He didn't flinch at the word. "I don't like depending on others." Renee sipped the coffee. It was strong and bitter. "And yet you're keeping me here." "That's different," he said. "You don't work for me." "Feels like I do." He looked at her, unreadable again. "You could if you wanted." She nearly choked on her drink. "What?" He shrugged. "You're smart. Observant. I could use someone like that." "You mean as your assistant? Or as your prisoner who files your papers?" His mouth twitched, a trace of amusement. "Neither. As someone I can trust." "I don't even trust you," she said. "I know," he replied and walked away. That afternoon Choi arrived. He nodded at Renee politely but without warmth. "Boss," he said, "the Red Dragons have moved faster than expected. They're buying out your supply chains." Rian's expression hardened. "Then we'll burn them down and build new ones." Choi hesitated. "And the woman?" Rian's tone sharpened. "She stays out of it." Renee stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You know I can hear you, right?" Rian turned to her. "Then you also know you're safer not asking questions." She frowned. "You don't get to make that choice for me." He stepped closer, voice low. "I already did." They stood like that for a moment. Close, tense, both unwilling to step back. Finally, Choi cleared his throat. "I'll handle the arrangements," he said awkwardly, then left them alone. Renee sighed. "You have a way of making people obey." "I prefer cooperation," Rian said. "But I take what I get." That night she couldn't sleep. The city outside glowed like a dream she couldn't touch. She wandered the hallways, barefoot, until she found herself back by the piano. Her fingers brushed the keys. One note, then another. She began to play again, softer this time. Music that sounded like thought. Rian appeared silently in the doorway. "You always play when you can't sleep," he said. She didn't stop. "You always sneak up on people." "It's a habit." He came closer, standing beside her. "Play that again." "Why?" "Because I like it." She played and he listened. For a few minutes, the space between them felt almost peaceful. Then, without warning, he said quietly, "You shouldn't have been at that club." Renee stopped playing. "I was just trying to forget." He studied her face. "Forgetting is dangerous. You never know what you'll lose along with the pain." She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what did you lose?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned away. "Get some rest, Renee. Tomorrow will be different." When he was gone, she sat for a long time, her fingers still resting on the keys. Different. She wasn't sure if he meant better or worse. The next morning, she found the door unlocked again. The fog had lifted. Sunlight poured in. For a second, she considered leaving, running down the elevator, catching a train, disappearing back into her old life. But she didn't move. Something held her there. Not fear, not obligation, but a strange pull she couldn't explain. She looked toward the hallway where Rian's study was, the faint sound of his voice on a phone call. "He's dangerous," she whispered to herself. "But so am I." And for the first time since she'd met him, Renee smiled. A small, knowing smile that said she wasn't just a trapped girl anymore. She was watching, learning, and soon she'd start making her own moves. By the end of that week, the tension in Rian's penthouse was something you could almost hear, like the low hum before a storm. Renee had learned to move quietly, to stay out of the way of his constant phone calls and meetings. Men came and went in dark suits, speaking in low, urgent tones. Every time she caught a few words, shipment, alliance, betrayal, her curiosity grew sharper. She told herself to stay uninvolved, but her mind refused to rest. That evening, when Rian finally stepped out onto the balcony, the sun was sinking behind the city. He leaned on the railing, the wind stirring his hair. Renee followed him, barefoot, wrapped in one of his spare coats. "You've been busy," she said. He didn't turn. "There's always something to fix." "Sounds exhausting," she said. He gave a short laugh. "It is. But it keeps people alive." Renee studied his profile, the hard jaw, the faint shadows under his eyes. "Who are the red dragons?" she asked carefully. His jaw tightened. "You've been listening." "Hard not to," she said. "You don't exactly whisper." He sighed. "They were allies once. Now they want what I built. They think fear makes them strong. And you? I think control does." Renee watched the city lights flicker below them. "So you're at war." "I'm always at war," he said quietly. The words should have scared her, but instead, they only made her want to understand him more. After a long silence, he turned to face her. "You should stay inside tomorrow. Have a meeting. It could get complicated." She met his gaze. "You think I'm going to run? I think you don't understand what kind of world you've stepped into," he said. "And I don't want you caught in it." Renee crossed her arms. "Then maybe you should stop bringing it home with you." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or admiration. "You're not afraid to speak your mind." "Someone has to," she said. He looked at her for a long time, then turned away. "Go inside, Renee. It's getting cold." She hesitated, but the look in his eyes told her the conversation was over. The next day began like any other. Soft light, the smell of coffee, the distant hum of the city. But by noon the atmosphere had shifted. Rian's men moved through the penthouse with sharp focus. Choi barked orders in Korean, checking his watch every few minutes. Renee stayed out of the way, pretending to read. But when Rian came downstairs dressed in black, she couldn't stop herself. "You're really going to meet them, aren't you?" she asked. He paused. "I have no choice. They tried to hurt me," she said. "Why meet them at all?" "Because power doesn't vanish when you ignore it," he said. "It grows. And if something happens to you..." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Then it happens." Before she could answer, he was already walking toward the elevator. Hours passed. The apartment felt emptier without him. Renee tried painting, but her brush refused to cooperate. The sky outside turned gray, then purple. She paced, restless, her heart uneasy. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her coat and stepped into the private elevator. She didn't even know where she was going, only that she couldn't sit there waiting. The old district of Seoul was alive with shadows when she arrived. She followed the address she'd overheard earlier, a warehouse by the river. The closer she got, the louder the noise. Shouting, crashing, the metallic sound of something breaking. Renee ducked behind a stack of crates and peered around the corner. Men in dark suits were shouting in Korean. She didn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable, threat and anger. In the center of it all was Rian, calm, controlled, surrounded. Her heart stopped. The leader of the Red Dragon Syndicate stepped forward, tall, scarred, a man whose smile didn't reach his eyes. He said something, and his men laughed. Rian didn't move. "You forget," he said in slow, deliberate English. "I don't beg." Then chaos exploded. Renee flinched as the first blow landed. Rian's men surged forward. The sound of fists and shouts filled the night. She wanted to run, but her feet wouldn't move. She saw Rian fight, precise, brutal, efficient. Every motion was controlled, like a man who had lived this his whole life. But there were too many of them. Without thinking, Renee grabbed a loose pipe from the ground. When one of the Red Dragon men turned toward her hiding spot, she swung with everything she had. He went down with a shout. The moment broke the rhythm of the fight. Rian turned sharply, saw her, and for the first time his calm cracked. "Renee," he shouted. "What are you doing here?" She froze. "Helping." He swore under his breath, grabbed her wrist, and pulled her behind him. "Stay down." Minutes later the sounds faded. The last of the Red Dragon men fled into the darkness, leaving only silence and the echo of heavy breathing. Rian turned to her, fury and relief warring in his eyes. "You shouldn't have come. You were outnumbered," she said. "I wanted them to think I was," he said sharply. "You could have been killed." She glared at him. "You think I care about your plans when people are trying to murder you?" He stared at her for a long moment. Then to her shock he laughed, low, tired but real. "You're unbelievable." "You're welcome," she said, crossing her arms. His expression softened. "Let's go home." On the drive back, neither of them spoke. The city lights flickered across his face, casting sharp shadows. When they reached the penthouse, he opened her door and said quietly, "You risked your life tonight." "So did you," she said. He shook his head. "I'm used to it." "You're not." Renee met his gaze. "Then maybe you should stop expecting me to stay on the sidelines." He looked at her, really looked, and for once had no answer. The next morning, the air in the penthouse felt charged. Renee woke to the sound of Rian arguing with someone in Korean. His voice was low, controlled, but there was steel in it. When he saw her appear in the doorway, he ended the call abruptly. "You shouldn't be up," he said. "I can walk," she said. "And talk. And ask why you're yelling at people before breakfast." He exhaled slowly. "The Red Dragons want a second meeting. They think last night was an insult." "It was," she said. "You didn't die." He didn't smile. "You don't understand. They'll come after everything now. My people, my businesses, anyone close to me." Renee froze. "Including me?" "Yes." She crossed her arms. "Then let me go. I'll disappear. They'll forget me." He shook his head. "You're safer where I can see you." "That's not safety," she snapped. "That's control." His eyes narrowed. "Maybe control is the only way to keep you alive." The silence stretched between them, sharp as broken glass. Finally Renee said, "You don't own me, Rian." "I never said I did." "You act like it." He turned away. "Then leave if that's what you want." The words caught her off guard. For a moment she didn't move. She should have walked out. Instead she said quietly, "And if I do?" He looked over his shoulder. "Then I'll find you." Her breath caught. Not because of the threat, but because of the certainty in his voice. She turned away, heart pounding. "You're impossible. And you're reckless," he said softly. "That's a dangerous mix." Later that day she painted. For the first time in weeks, the colors flowed easily. Gold, red, and deep blue. When Rian passed by, he stopped. "What is it?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Fire meeting ice." He studied the canvas. The bold strokes, the chaos that somehow made sense. "It looks like a war." "Maybe it is," she said. He said nothing for a long time. Then quietly, "Don't lose that fire, Renee." She looked at him. Then stopped trying to put it out. Something in his expression shifted. For the first time he looked uncertain. That evening, Rian left again for another meeting. Renee stood by the window, watching the city. Her reflection looked stronger somehow. Sharper, steadier. When Choi stopped by with food, he said, "You're different from anyone he's met." Renee smiled faintly. "I'm sure he says that to all his guests." Choi shook his head. "No. He doesn't let people stay this long." She frowned. "Why me?" Choi hesitated. "Because you remind him that he's still human." When he left, Renee stared out into the night, his words echoing. Near midnight, Rian returned. His expression was unreadable, but his shirt was streaked with blood. Renee rushed forward. "You're hurt." "It's not mine," he said quickly. She stopped, unsure whether to feel relieved or afraid. "What happened?" He poured himself a drink instead of answering. "The red dragons don't believe in peace. And you do." "I believe in balance," he said. "Peace is a luxury people like me don't get." Renee stepped closer. "You talk like someone who's already given up." He looked at her, eyes dark and tired. "Maybe I have." "Then why save me?" she asked. He stared at her for a long moment. "Because I needed a reason not to destroy everything." The words hit her harder than she expected. Before she could respond, he set down the glass and said quietly, "You should rest. Tomorrow things will change." "Good or bad?" she asked. He gave a small, tired smile. "Depends on how much fire you have left." That night, Renee lay awake listening to the rain. The city outside never slept, but inside that glass tower, time felt still. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Danger, escape, maybe even war. But one thing was certain. She wasn't just a bystander in Rian June's world anymore. She was part of the fire that kept it burning. The rain had finally stopped, but the air over Seoul still felt heavy. Rian had gone before dawn, leaving only a brief note on the marble table. "Back by nightfall. Stay inside." Renee read the words twice. She was getting used to his short commands, but not to the way they sounded halfway between protection and possession. She spent the morning pacing the apartment, painting for a while, then stopping again. Nothing she made could quiet her thoughts. The events of the past weeks replayed in her mind. The club, the danger, the strange safety she now lived inside. Around noon, curiosity won. She began to explore. The penthouse was enormous. Long hallways, cold steel doors, windows that looked over the river like glass walls. Yet parts of it felt unlived in, as though Rian had built himself a cage of wealth and forgotten how to fill it. She turned a corner she'd never noticed before. At the end was a door that didn't match the rest. Dark wood instead of metal, its handle old and ornate. When she pressed it, it didn't move. But as she stepped back, a faint draft touched her hand. The frame wasn't sealed. There was air coming through. Renee hesitated. Then she noticed a key hanging on a hook nearby, half hidden by a coat. It looked old, bronze and heavy. Her heart pounded as she lifted it. The lock clicked softly. The door opened inward. The room beyond was small and dim. Dust motes hung in the sunlight coming from a single narrow window. On the wall were photographs. Dozens of them. And in every one of them was the same woman. She looked almost like Renee. Same height, same deep brown eyes, though her hair was shorter, her smile softer. Some pictures showed her laughing beside Rian. In others she painted or played piano, or looked at him with a tenderness that made Renee's chest tighten. A glass table in the center of the room held a single frame. The photograph inside was cracked but still clear. The woman sitting beside Rian, their hands touching. Renee whispered the name printed faintly in the corner. Hannah. She remembered Choi once mentioning that name, in a hushed tone. So this was her. A shiver ran through Renee. The resemblance was uncanny. Close enough that if someone saw her from a distance, they might think Hannah had come back. But there was something else in the room too. a folded newspaper clipping pinned to the wall. She leaned closer. Local artist found dead in Riverside fire. No suspects identified. Her stomach dropped. Hannah was an artist. The headline was dated 2 years ago. The edges of the article were burnt, as if someone had tried to destroy it and couldn't bring themselves to finish. Behind her a quiet voice said, "You shouldn't be here." Renee spun around. Rian stood in the doorway. His expression was calm, but his eyes were darker than she'd ever seen. "I didn't mean to pry," she said quickly. "The door was unlocked." "It wasn't," he interrupted. "You found a way." Renee took a breath. Who was she? For a moment he didn't speak. Then he walked past her. His gaze fixed on the photograph on the table. "She was everything I couldn't protect," he said softly. "Hannah," Renee said. "She looked like me." "Yes." The single word hung between them. "Is that why you helped me?" she asked. He turned to her. "No. I helped you because I couldn't help her." Renee stepped closer. "What happened to her?" He stared at the cracked photograph. "She trusted someone she shouldn't have. A man I thought was my ally. When the Red Dragon Syndicate wanted information about my operation, she was caught between us. I thought I could save her. I was wrong." Renee's throat tightened. "The fire." He nodded once. "I still don't know if they killed her or if she ended it herself. I never found out." Silence filled the room. Renee felt both sympathy and unease. The story was tragic, but the intensity in his eyes scared her. Finally she said, "You keep this room like a shrine." He looked at her. "It reminds me of what happens when I lose control." Renee whispered, "You can't live in a memory forever." His expression softened, but only slightly. "And you can't replace one either." She flinched. "Is that what I am to you? A replacement?" Rian took a slow breath. "No. You're proof that I can still care about something." He turned and walked out, leaving her alone with the photographs and the quiet hum of the city below. That night she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Hannah's face, the fire reflected in her imagination. The resemblance haunted her. She finally got up and went to the balcony. The city glowed silver under the moon. Somewhere out there, the same people who had destroyed Hannah were still watching. She understood now why Rian had become what he was. Control was the only way he knew to stop the past from repeating. But control wasn't protection. It was a prison with a view. Renee gripped the railing. She wouldn't be another ghost in his house. The next morning, Rian left early again, and the penthouse felt emptier than ever. Renee wandered from room to room, her thoughts racing. She had to get out. She couldn't live surrounded by ghosts and guards. The elevator required a code. The front door was watched by security cameras. But she remembered something from before. The emergency exit near the service hall. She had seen a small control panel there, maybe with a manual override. Her heart pounded as she searched. In the drawer of the desk in the study, she found a thin silver card labeled override key. She stared at it, then closed her fist around it. "Just until I'm safe," she whispered. By evening, the sky had turned gold and gray. She waited until the guards outside rotated shifts, then moved. Every step felt louder than it was. She slipped into the service hall, found the control panel, and slid the card into the slot. Soft click. The light turned green. The door opened onto a narrow staircase leading down into the lower levels of the tower. She ran, her breath echoing in the metal stairwell. When she reached the ground floor, she hesitated only a moment before pushing through another door into the cool night air. Freedom. For the first time in weeks, she felt the wind without glass between her and the world. She didn't look back. Halfway down the street, a black car turned the corner ahead. Her pulse spiked. She darted into an alley, crouched behind a crate, and waited. The car slowed, headlights sweeping the walls, then moved on. She exhaled shakily and kept walking until the city lights thickened. Crowds, noise, safety in numbers. She made her way toward the train station, clutching the small bag she'd packed. She didn't know where she would go. Busan maybe, or out of Korea entirely. Anywhere but here. But as she stepped onto the platform, her phone vibrated. Unknown number. You shouldn't have run, Renee. She froze. Another message followed. Look up. She lifted her eyes. At the far end of the platform, two men in dark coats watched her. They weren't Rian's guards. She recognized the serpent emblem on one man's sleeve, the mark of the Red Dragon Syndicate. Panic surged. She turned and ran, weaving through the crowd. Someone shouted in Korean behind her. She pushed through the exit, out onto the street, lungs burning. A car screeched to a halt beside her. The door opened. Get in, Rian's voice ordered. For one heartbeat she hesitated. Then the Red Dragon men burst from the station doors, and she dived into the car. The door slammed shut. Tires screamed. The city blurred past in streaks of neon. Rian's hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. You almost got yourself killed. I didn't ask you to follow me, she shot back. You didn't have to. She turned to him. You tracked me. I had to know where you were in case something like this happened. You think that makes it right. I think it kept you alive. They drove in silence for several minutes, the tension thicker than the fog outside. Finally she said, You can't lock me away forever. I'm not trying to. It feels like it. He looked at her, eyes dark with something between anger and fear. If I lose you too, it will destroy me. The rawness in his voice stunned her. For a moment she didn't know what to say. Finally she whispered, I'm not her, Rian. I know, he said quietly. But you walked straight into the same fire. He pulled the car into an underground garage beneath the tower. Guards rushed to open the doors, speaking rapidly in Korean. Rian ignored them, motioning for her to follow. Inside the elevator the silence returned. Renee's chest felt tight. You can't keep me because you're afraid of your past, she said. He looked at her reflection in the mirrored wall. Maybe that's the only way I know how to keep anyone safe. When the doors opened, he walked her to her room and stopped at the doorway. No more running. Renee met his eyes. Then start trusting me enough to stay by choice. He didn't answer. The door closed softly behind him. Hours later, Renee sat on the edge of the bed, thinking. The escape had failed, but she wasn't the same frightened woman who'd stumbled into his club weeks ago. She understood now that fear and power were both cages, and she refused to live in either. She crossed to the window and looked out at the city again. The skyline shimmered like fire on glass. Somewhere below, the Red Dragons were regrouping. The danger was far from over. Behind her, the faint click of the lock told her that Rian had sealed the room again. She smiled faintly without humor. You can't cage fire, she whispered. And as she turned back toward the window, her reflection looked different. Stronger, steadier, already planning the next move. The sun hadn't yet risen when Rian's voice broke through the darkness. Wake up. Renee blinked, sitting up quickly. His tone wasn't cold this time, it was sharp, urgent. She looked at him and saw something she hadn't before. Fear. What's happening? She asked. Red Dragon moved, he said. They know where we are. Her pulse jumped. How? I don't know. But they're coming. The tension in his voice stripped away any doubt. This wasn't about control anymore. This was survival. He opened the closet, pulling out a black coat and tossing it to her. Put this on. Now. Where are we going? Somewhere safer, he said. Don't argue. Renee didn't. She pulled on the coat, grabbed her bag, and followed him into the elevator. The city outside was just beginning to wake, its sky a pale shade of gray. As they stepped into the underground garage, Rian's men were already waiting. Choi was among them, face tense. Boss, Choi said quickly. We've blocked the main roads, but there's movement near the river. How many? Rian asked. 3 cars. Maybe 4. Rian nodded once. We'll take the back route. The moment they got into the car, Renee's nerves began to fray. The air was too quiet, too heavy. Even the sound of tires on the wet road felt loud. Rian's eyes stayed fixed on the mirrors, scanning every shadow. "Stay low," he said. She did. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She wanted to ask 100 questions. Why now, what they wanted, what would happen if they caught them, but his silence told her enough. Halfway across the bridge, the first shot rang out. The sound shattered the morning calm like thunder. The window beside Renee cracked. She gasped, ducking lower. Rian cursed under his breath and slammed his foot on the gas. More gunfire. The car ahead swerved. Choi shouted something into the radio. Renee could barely hear over the pounding in her ears. "Rian," she shouted. "They're behind us." "I know." The black sedan in the mirror was gaining fast. Rian turned sharply down a narrow street that wound along the riverbank. The tires screamed against the wet pavement. "Hold on," he barked. The car jolted hard, clipping the curb. Renee's shoulder slammed against the door. Pain shot through her arm, but she stayed quiet. She wouldn't panic, not now. Another gunshot. This one hit the back of the car with a dull thud. Sparks flew. Rian swore again and spun the wheel into a tight turn that threw her against the seat. The pursuing car overshot the corner, crashing into a lamppost. Rian slammed the brakes. The world tilted for a moment. Then chaos. His men jumped out shouting. Bullets cracked against metal. "Stay down," Rian ordered. But she saw him reach for the door, gun in hand. "Wait," Renee said, grabbing his arm. "Don't." "I have to," he said, his voice quiet and final. "They're here for me, not you." He opened the door before she could stop him and disappeared into the storm of noise outside. Renee pressed herself low, covering her ears. Every sound felt distant and unreal. She couldn't see him, only the flicker of movement. Shadows, flashes, men shouting. Then suddenly silence. She lifted her head. The air smelled of smoke and wet asphalt. When she opened the door, her knees almost gave out. Rian stood a few feet away, breathing hard, gun still in his hand. 2 cars burned quietly behind him. His men were rounding up the few who had survived. "Are you hurt?" he asked without turning. "No," she whispered. He looked over his shoulder, eyes wild for just a second before softening. "Then let's end this." They drove the rest of the way in silence. When they reached the outskirts of the city, Rian parked beside a small, private villa surrounded by tall hedges. The kind of place built for disappearing. "Stay inside," he said. "I'm not leaving you," Renee said. "This isn't up for discussion. Neither is my choice." Their eyes met. Something in his expression shifted. Not anger this time, but a strange, quiet acceptance. "Then stay close," he said. That night, the wind howled outside like an echo of their exhaustion. Renee sat by the window, watching the rain return. Her arm throbbed where the bruise was forming, but the pain felt distant compared to everything else. Rian entered quietly, his coat gone. His sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked tired, older somehow. "You should rest," he said. "I can't," she murmured. He walked to the window beside her. "You're brave," he said softly. She shook her head. "No, just lucky. Luck doesn't make someone stay when they could run." His voice was gentle, almost uncertain. It startled her more than the gunfire had. "I stayed because I didn't want to watch someone else die," she said. He looked at her, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The storm outside filled the silence. Finally Rian said, "You keep doing that, saying things that sound simple but aren't. Maybe you've just forgotten what simple sounds like," she said. He smiled faintly, then turned toward the door. "Get some sleep, Renee. Tomorrow will be worse." When she finally lay down, she couldn't close her eyes. Every sound in the house made her heart race. Somewhere beyond the walls, the Red Dragon Syndicate was still moving, waiting. But so was Rian. And somehow, she knew he wasn't going to run. The next morning the air felt different, still and sharp. The storm had passed, leaving a cold, clear light that filled the room. Renee woke to find a bandage wrapped neatly around her arm. She frowned, remembering the bruise. Someone had cleaned it while she slept. She found Rian in the kitchen making coffee. For a moment, she just watched him, the quiet precision in his movements, the way he carried calm like armor. "Thank you," she said finally. He looked up. "For what?" "For keeping me alive." He poured a second cup and handed it to her. "Don't thank me yet. It's not over." She sat across from him. "You really think they'll keep coming?" He nodded. "Until I stop them. Or they stop me." Renee stared into her cup. "You talk like it doesn't matter which." "Because it doesn't," he said. "I made my choice years ago." "What choice?" "To build something that could never be taken from me," he said. "To make sure no one could hurt the people I cared about again." "Hannah," she whispered. He didn't flinch. "Yes, Hannah." He leaned back in his chair. "She was innocent. She believed people could change. I wanted to believe her. But belief doesn't protect anyone." Renee looked at him closely. "You've been carrying that guilt ever since." He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Rian," she said quietly, "you can't fight ghosts." He looked at her, eyes unreadable. "And what do you fight, Renee?" She hesitated. "Myself." He gave a small nod, as if that made sense. "Then we're the same." She wanted to argue but couldn't. Because in that moment she understood. They were both people who had lost everything and didn't know how to start again. Later, while Rian stepped outside to make a call, Renee wandered through the villa. It was smaller than the penthouse, warmer somehow. Paintings hung on the walls. Landscapes, portraits, things that didn't belong in the home of a man like him. When she looked closer, she realized they were all signed the same way. Hannah. Renee's chest tightened. Each brushstroke carried emotion. Bright colors, soft edges, hope. It was everything Rian's world wasn't. When he came back inside, she said quietly, "You kept her art." He nodded. "It's all I have left that wasn't burned." "She must have loved you," Renee said. "She did," he said softly. "And I loved her. But love didn't save her." Renee looked at one of the paintings, a field of red flowers under a golden sky. "Maybe it saved something of her," she said. He glanced at her, then at the painting, and for the first time, his expression truly softened. "You see things differently," he said. "Maybe that's why you need me here," she said quietly. He turned toward her. "Need?" She met his eyes. "You've built your life on fear and control. Maybe it's time you remembered something else." He studied her for a long time, and the silence stretched until it felt like a living thing between them. Then he said, "You think I can just walk away?" "No," she said. "But you can stop letting the dead decide how you live." Her words lingered in the air. Rian didn't answer, but something in his face shifted, a crack in the armor he'd worn for years. That night, the villa was quiet. Rian sat by the window, lost in thought. Renee painted in the next room, the soft sound of her brush against canvas filling the silence. Neither spoke, but the air between them felt less like tension now and more like understanding. When she finally stepped into the hallway, she found him still there. "You haven't moved," she said. "I was thinking," he replied, "about whether there's a way out of this without losing everything again." "There is," she said. "You just have to believe in something other than control." He gave a small, almost weary smile. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she said. "But nothing worth having ever is." Rian looked out at the night, then back at her. "Maybe you're right." Renee stepped closer. "Then start proving it." The wind outside rattled the windows, but for the first time since she'd met him, he didn't look like a man waiting for war. He looked like someone who might finally be ready to stop fighting. Later, when she returned to her room, Renee set down her brush and stared at the painting she'd finished. Two figures standing under a stormy sky, their hands reaching but not quite touching. She smiled faintly. "Almost," she whispered. Outside, the first snow of the year began to fall over Seoul, soft, silent, and full of promise. Morning came quietly, with pale light spilling through the villa's tall windows. The storm had cleared, leaving the sky washed clean. Dawn came shrouded in fog, the kind that clung to the city like a whisper of something unfinished. Rian stood by the window, already dressed in black, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Renee watched him silently, a knot forming in her chest. The paper with Hannah's code lay between them on the table, edges worn, ink faint, but alive with meaning. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. He didn't look away from the window. "I have to be. What if it's another trap?" "Then we walk in knowing," he said. "That makes it ours." Renee exhaled slowly. There was something final in his voice, a tone she had learned to recognize. Not recklessness but resolve. The kind of resolve that didn't leave room for turning back. They left the villa as the city woke. Traffic murmured in the distance. Birds scattered across the gray sky. The drive to the river felt endless. Every block an echo of memories neither of them wanted to name. When they finally reached the old district, the fog was thicker. The river stretched wide and dark, moving slow and heavy, carrying fragments of light from the city above. The same place Hannah had died. The same place the code had led them back to. Rian parked the car near the abandoned pier. "Stay behind me," he said. Renee gave a small, tired smile. "You say that like I ever listen." He didn't argue. They walked down the worn wooden planks until they reached the edge of the dock. A single warehouse stood nearby. Its roof caved in, windows shattered, walls tagged with years of graffiti. Nature and neglect had both claimed it. "This is it," Rian said. "Hannah's last exhibition used to be here before it burned." Renee ran her fingers along the scorched walls. "She came back here before she died." "I think so," Rian said. "And I think she left something behind." He reached for a flashlight and stepped inside. The beam cut through dust and shadows. The smell of old smoke still lingered. Renee followed, careful to avoid the broken glass scattered across the floor. The walls were covered in remnants of paintings, fragments of color, shapes half erased by fire. It looked like someone had tried to destroy every trace of beauty and failed. Then she saw it. Near the back, hidden behind a fallen beam, one section of wall was different. Smoother, cleaner. She brushed off the dust and found faint markings underneath. Symbols. The same pattern from Hannah's code. "Rian," she said. "Here." He came over, flashlight steady. "She painted over it," he murmured. "To hide something." Renee's pulse quickened. "Can we get it open?" Rian pulled a small knife from his coat and began scraping gently at the surface. The layer of paint flaked away, revealing a small metal door embedded in the wall, no bigger than a shoebox. He pried it open. Inside was a small, sealed envelope wrapped in plastic. Rian lifted it carefully. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. "Rian, if you found this, it means I failed. But it also means you didn't." His hands tightened. For a long moment he couldn't move. Renee touched his arm gently. "Open it," she whispered. He nodded and tore the seal. Inside was a flash drive and a folded note. He unfolded it slowly. "The Red Dragon Syndicate was never what you thought. They are not fighting for control, they are cleaning evidence. Of us. Of me. Of the art that spoke too much truth. If you want to stop them, show the world what they tried to erase. The proof is on this drive. Promise me, Rian. Don't let my death mean silence." The words blurred as his grip trembled. Renee's voice broke the silence. She wasn't trying to run from them. She was trying to expose them. Rian nodded slowly. "And they killed her for it." He slipped the flash drive into his pocket. "Then we finish what she started." But before they could move, a voice echoed through the empty warehouse. "Beautiful, isn't it? The way ghosts always bring you home." Renee froze. Rian turned sharply, gun drawn. From the doorway, a familiar figure emerged. The tall envoy from the docks, flanked by 3 men. Their guns gleamed in the pale light. "Put it down," the envoy said, smirking. "You've done enough damage." Rian didn't move. "You followed us." "Of course," the man said. "You think you're the only one who can read a code?" Renee's heart pounded. She glanced around, searching for cover. There was none. The open space was a trap. The envoy raised his hand. "The girl. Give her to me, and maybe you walk away." Rian's voice dropped. "Touch her, and you don't leave this building." "Still pretending you can protect everyone," the man sneered. "Just like before. How did that work out for Hannah?" The name hit like a blade. Rian's finger tightened on the trigger. "Rian," Renee whispered. "Don't." But it was too late. The sound of gunfire shattered the air. Rian fired first, clean, precise. One of the men went down instantly. The others spread out, shouting. Renee dove behind a broken pillar, heart hammering, the echo of shots filling her ears. Rian moved like a shadow, swift and silent. For every bullet that hit concrete, his aim found its mark. But there were too many. The envoy ducked behind cover, reloading. "End of the road," he shouted. "You can't stop the truth from burning." Renee looked down. The flash drive had fallen from Rian's pocket, sliding across the floor. It stopped inches from the envoy's boot. Without thinking, she ran. "Renee!" Rian shouted. She slid across the floor, grabbed the drive and turned, just as the envoy lifted his gun. A single shot rang out. Pain seared through her shoulder. The world tilted. She hit the ground, the flash drive clutched tight in her hand. Rian's roar filled the room. He moved faster than thought, disarming the envoy with a brutal strike, then throwing him hard against the wall. The gun clattered away. The man coughed, blood staining his lips. "You think this changes anything?" he rasped. "You kill me, another takes my place." Rian's eyes were cold. "Then I'll keep killing until there's no one left." The shot that ended it was quiet, final. When the echo faded, the only sound was the slow, uneven beat of rain against the roof. Renee struggled to sit up. Rian was beside her in seconds, his hand steady on her face. "You're okay," he said, voice low but breaking. "You're okay." She managed a weak smile. "You always say that when it's a lie." He huffed a short, choked laugh. "Maybe." He tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it against her wound. "Stay awake." "I'm fine," she whispered. "Just don't lose the drive." He looked down at it in her hand. "I won't." When he helped her stand, she swayed but didn't fall. Together, they walked out into the gray morning, the river reflecting the faint light of dawn. Neither spoke on the way back to the car. The silence between them wasn't fear anymore. It was something heavier, deeper. The weight of survival. By the time they returned to the villa, the sky had cleared. Rian's men were waiting, tense, armed, ready for news. He gave none. He carried Renee inside, ignoring everyone's stares, and laid her gently on the couch. Choi hurried forward with a first aid kit, muttering in Korean under his breath. "Clean shot," he said after a moment. "Missed the bone. She'll live." Rian exhaled slowly, the tightness in his shoulders easing just slightly. Renee managed a faint grin. "Told you I'm hard to kill." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Don't ever prove that again." She laughed softly, then winced. "What now?" He looked toward the small flash drive on the table. "Now we finish it." Hours later, the villa was dark except for the blue glow of the laptop screen. Rian sat beside Renee, their shoulders almost touching, as the contents of the drive loaded. Folders appeared. Hundreds of images, documents, recordings. Corruption. Money trails. Every illegal connection between the Red Dragon Syndicate and high-ranking officials across the country. Proof enough to collapse empires. Hannah had gathered it all. Renee's voice was barely a whisper. She was going to expose them. Rian nodded slowly. And they burned her before she could. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. If I release this, it won't stop with them. It'll drag me down too. Renee looked at him. Then you decide what matters more, survival or truth. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he hit send. The files began to upload to a dozen news outlets, encrypted and scattered. There was no going back. When it was done, Rian leaned back in his chair. It's over. But Renee shook her head. No. It's just beginning. By evening, the storm had passed over Seoul. News reports flooded every channel. Leaked evidence, exposed syndicates, government arrests. The Red Dragon Syndicate fractured overnight. Some fled. Some turned on each other. The city trembled under the weight of revelation. From the balcony, Rian watched it unfold. The skyline shimmered in the distance, flashing with police lights and sirens. For the first time in years he looked uncertain, not broken but unmoored. Renee joined him quietly, her arm bandaged. You did it, she said. He didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the city. Hannah did. I just finished what she started. And what about you? He smiled faintly. I don't know yet. They stood in silence. Below them, the river reflected the lights like gold threads on black silk. After a long while she said softly, you could leave now. Disappear. Start over. He looked at her. And you? I already started over, she said. The night you pulled me out of that club. He studied her face. The quiet strength, the fire that hadn't dimmed even after everything. Then he nodded once. Then maybe I can too. The next morning the villa was still. Rian packed a single bag. No weapons, no suits, no symbols of who he had been. Just clothes, a passport, and one folded painting. The portrait Renee had made of him. When he came downstairs, she was waiting by the door. You're really leaving, she said. He nodded. I have to. There's too much blood here. Renee crossed her arms. So that's it. He smiled slightly. No. That's the beginning. He handed her a small envelope. Inside are the gallery rights. Hannah's and yours. Everything that was mine, it belongs to you now. Build something with it that isn't made of fear. She stared at him, throat tight. You're serious? Completely. And where will you go? He looked out the window at the city. Somewhere no one knows my name. For a moment neither spoke. Then Renee stepped closer. Thank you, she whispered. For saving me. Even when I didn't want to be saved. Rian met her eyes. No, Renee. You saved me. He turned, opened the door and stepped into the light. The morning air smelled of rain and new beginnings. As he walked away, she watched until his figure vanished into the sunlit haze. Then she looked down at the envelope in her hands, the weight of it, the promise inside, and smiled. The past had burned. The truth had survived. And somewhere out there, the man who once ruled through fear was finally free enough to begin again. If you felt the fire, the fear, and the heartbeat in every scene, don't just click away. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and join the story because this is just the beginning. Every episode takes us deeper into the world of power, pain, and love that defies every rule. Comment below what you think Rian and Renee should face next. Your words might just shape the next chapter. And remember, in this story nobody's safe and nothing is ever what it seems.